most important thing is all these guys behind me are the people who create jobs, who invest in our communities, who provide our tax base in this state. And I'm just here to be the coordinator because these guys are not politicians, they're not elected officials, they're not talking heads. They're people who create jobs. They are people who are on the front lines of Georgia businesses every day, and they want to see change in this state so that they can continue to create jobs and continue to invest in this economy. You know, one of those news conferences that I put together here more than a decade ago, we had a big screen right here that said Georgia, #1 state to do business. And here we are more than a decade later, and we still have that designation, but that was the first time. And one thing we said that day was we can't rest on our laurels. We can't just maintain the status quo and stay on top because everybody is shooting for us. This is one of those issues where we have got to move forward, where we got to have change in this state. Our first speaker today is in the manufacturing sector. His name is Michael Edwards. He's from Mannington Mills. Their headquarters is in Calhoun, and they have 3 other locations in the state of Georgia. Michael?
Good morning. My name is Michael Edwards. I'm Senior Vice President of Operations for Mannington Mills. We are a 110-year-old company. We are headquartered in Calhoun, as Brian said, and we do have four operations in 4 different cities around Georgia. Also, as Brian said, he stole my line, that this is not what I do. I'm not a lobbyist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a manufacturer. I make flooring. That's just all I've ever done. I've done that for 30 years now, and I've done it in this state, in Georgia. I'm here today because this topic is very important to me. As a citizen of this state, a lifelong citizen of the state, and as a manufacturer. Manufacturing generates $80 billion annually for Georgia. That's nearly 10% of the GDP. Jobs in our industry are high paying, stable, and located in parts of our state that need it most. 13% of the non-Atlanta MSA employment comes from manufacturing, but we cannot take this for granted. Georgia's competing nationally and globally, and we're competing by manufacturing things that we make here. We're also competing to bring in and attract and retain manufacturers that are going to make things here in the future. Georgia has the infrastructure. We have the regulations to support responsible growth and protect our workers and environment. We, manufacturers, comply with those rules. What Georgia does not have today is a fair and predictable judicial system. Businesses are at a constant risk of being sued, even when we abide by all the rules. You don't have to do a lot of research to see how imbalanced the nature of our legal environment is today. Legal industry spends over $80 million each year advertising. Billboards, TV commercials are aimed at convincing Georgians that working hard and getting ahead should be replaced by getting hurt and getting paid. This is not about fairness. This is not about fairness, and it's not about reining in bad corporations. This is about money. The promise of big money to individuals and the reality of big money to lawyers is corrosive and cannot be ignored about what it's doing to our state. Neighboring states have already taken steps to improve the legal climate, making them more attractive for new investment and job creation. Meanwhile, companies in Georgia are spending money to fight baseless claims, paying settlements, to avoid expensive court battles, and they're doing all this instead of hiring, training, and investing in new technologies and expanding operations. And all of this spending, in turn, is passed along to Georgia consumers. We need tort reform. These bills do not fix everything, but this legislation is well thought out, and if passed as written, is a strong move in the right direction. I would like to thank the Governor Kemp, I'd like to thank Speaker Burns and the Senate for your support on sending these bills to the House and on your leadership for bringing this forward. Now we're asking you, the House, to stand with manufacturers and the 435,000 Georgians whose job depends on this industry. We urge you to vote yes on Senate Bills 68 and 69 and keep these bills clean so they can drive meaningful reform in our state. Thank you.
Next we have Charles Tarbutton from BH Transfer Company in Sandersville. It is a trucking company. They are the people who make sure that everything that you eat, everything that you wear, gets to your local retailer.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Tarbutton, and I am the president of BH Transfer, a 54-year-old family-owned trucking company based in Sandersville, Georgia. I would first like to thank Governor Brian Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and Senator John Kennedy for the tireless work that they have invested over the last 30 legislative days and the months prior to pass meaningful tort reform. I also want to thank Speaker John Burns and the members of the Rules Subcommittee on Lawsuit Reform for their tireless work over the last 2 weeks, ensuring all parties are heard on this critical issue. I speak not only on behalf of our 325 families that are part of the BH Transfer family, but also on behalf of over 330,000 Georgians that work in the trucking industry, 1 in 12 Georgia jobs. 76% of Georgia's communities are completely dependent on trucking to deliver the goods consumed in those communities. Folks, I am here to tell you that Georgia runs on trucking. Safety and compliance is and always has been the #1 priority of the trucking industry. But Georgia's trucking companies are being run off of the proverbial road by Georgia's imbalanced civil justice system. At this moment, our small business is the target of a dozen or so lawsuits in the state of Georgia, the majority of which have no verifiable injuries. However, the threat of nuclear verdicts, like the one a few weeks ago against Ford Motor Company, means that we will be pressured to settle those lawsuits without claimants having to prove their injury. And we are but one of thousands of trucking companies in Georgia that face the exact same threat every day. This fight is not about insurance or insurance companies. It is about the survival of small businesses in every corner of this state that provide the majority of jobs in Georgia. We are investing in growing our business in neighboring states. We are not, however, growing and investing our business in Georgia. Our family has been in Georgia since the 1830s. We're committed to this state, but the investment climate here is very challenging. I've heard it many times over the last several weeks. This is really about big corporations versus the little guy. I urge the members of the House to reject that fallacy. I speak on behalf of over 75,000 truck drivers in Georgia. We are the little guys, and we spend every day with a target on our backs because all it takes is one lawsuit to put us out of business. There's an old saying among those of us who have been sued many times: if the law is on your side, argue the law. If the facts are on your side, argue the facts. If you have neither on your side, pound on the table. There's been a lot of table pounding over the last several weeks, but I implore the members of the General Assembly to listen to the facts, to look at the law, to study the legislation in SB 68 and 69. The reforms proposed by Governor Kemp's legislation will have long-term, measurable, positive effects for small businesses like ours and those across all of Georgia who provide the majority of jobs in this state. Thank you very much.
Now, representing Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture, we have Russ Wilburn from Winder, who is the proprietor of Beach Creek Farms.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Russ Wilburn, a cattle and hay producer from Northeast Georgia. I come before you today representing all of Georgia farmers and agriculture, which is the state's #1 industry. I serve in many capacities in my local community, like my local Farm Bureau Board, Georgia Cattlemen's Association, Oconee Soil and Water Conservation, and Farm Service Agency Committee. As a first-generation farmer, I have been fortunate in pursuing my dream of farming. I see farming as generational, as so many family farms in this state are, and therefore not only do I farm to provide for my family, but I also hope to instill in my kids the work ethic and rural lifestyle associated with agriculture, and hopefully pass the farm on to them one day. For young farmers like me, who started out 13 years ago, the barrier to entry is enormous, from high land prices, capital investments in equipment, and high input costs that have doubled in the last few years, such as labor, fuel, and fertilizer. In addition, insurance premiums have also skyrocketed for Georgia farmers, who are small business owners as well. Couple those factors with the majority of commodities suffering from historically low prices, the future of agriculture can be dire. If we want to continue to produce food and fiber domestically instead of importing it from other countries, we must ensure the next generation has these opportunities without the fear of frivolous lawsuits, where the scales tend to be tipped and they risk losing what they have worked so hard to build. Whether it's moving equipment down the road, hauling commodities to market, or just having the general public out to enjoy a day on my farm, there should not be this out-of-control threat of litigation. Farmers are tasked with the job of feeding, clothing, and putting shelter over our heads, and I believe we need to provide them with everything they need to be viable and sustainable for years to come. Our farmers are the backbone of this state, and they too need this now more than ever. In the words of our Ag Commissioner Tyler Harper, food security here at home means national security. I'm thankful for the opportunity to come before you today to talk about an industry that I so dearly love. I greatly appreciate and would like to say thank you to Governor Kemp, along with the House and Senate leadership, and all those that have worked so hard to bring some much needed balance back to our legal system. Thank you.
Next up, we have the Chief Marketing Officer of Clipper Petroleum, Caylee Bauer-Frank. They're based out of Flowery Branch.
Good morning, y'all. Thank you, Brian. As you stated, I'm Caylee Bauer-Frank, the third generation to own and operate Clipper Petroleum, my family's small business, for the past 51 years. We operate 23 convenience stores in North Georgia, and I also serve as the Government Relations Chairwoman of the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores. Our industry is under attack by attorneys who pursue frivolous lawsuits. Convenience stores are being forced to close early, ceasing 24 hours of operation, leaving night shift workers without a place to fuel up. This can be detrimental to those workers. For example, in Rockmart, Georgia, there is a processing plant with many night shift employees. So many that one of my peers shared with me that more than 15% of the store's total sales happen between midnight and 7 a.m. Now, this independent convenience store owner and operator is struggling with finding an insurance carrier that will write a policy for a 24-hour location, although crime is not an issue in this area. The claims and lawsuits that convenience stores are being forced to settle is truly incredulous. Last year, there was a $1.1 million settlement at a Metro Atlanta store, and this is separate and distinct from the one that you have all heard about previously. 2 cars with 3 to 4 occupants in each vehicle entered the property at approximately 3:30 in the morning, parked beyond the gas pumps the furthest away from the C-store, near the edge of the property in a non-parking area. Prior to the two parties arriving at the property, they were apparently in an altercation nearby. Neither party came inside to the C-store to purchase any items, and they never pumped fuel in either of the two vehicles. The members of each party exited their vehicles and began to physically fight on the property. After a few minutes, one of the parties got into their vehicle to leave. A male inside the car pulled a gun and shot a woman in the other party in the leg. By the grace of God, she survived, but that woman later sued this store and this company for negligent security. When you watch the video, it is absolutely clear no security guard, armed or unarmed, no customer service representative at the store could have broken this up. In addition, these unwelcome events, we are having to make tough decisions to close during inclement weather, like snow and ice, for fear of slip and fall, even after adequately de-icing sidewalks. We know the public needs us during these events, but there are times when we have to decide, is it worth the risk? Do we serve the public or protect our company during weather events? It is very hard when we find our industry struggling to determine which vehicle stop should we use in front of our stores. Should we use wheel stops or covered concrete posts? To keep customers safe in the store, we have to install one of these options. But we continually are forced to defend ourselves against frivolous suits from people who claim to have tripped over the stop or got hurt bumping into the post. It is sad when someone intentionally falls in your store and we are forced to settle a claim because we have to choose which option is the least expensive. Do we settle and watch our insurance premiums increase, or do we challenge, burden the stress, spend the time to defend ourselves, and pay attorney fees? We should not have to defend our locations when we have not been negligent in any way, shape, or form. Our industry, as well as the entire business industry, is under fire. I want to thank Governor Kemp for hearing our pleas for help, the Senate for passing Senate Bill 68, and Senator Kennedy for carrying the bill, and the House for taking up more than 10 hours of testimony on the bill to make sure everyone's concerns have been heard. Georgia's small businesses need reform because the current situation is absolutely crushing responsible businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. One of my favorite convenience store stories is they had somebody go in, there was a crack in the window of the beer cooler, and the guy was standing there unmoving, hoping that it would eventually crack and shatter and he could then sue the company. They finally had to ask him to leave, but they were playing the system. So many people are doing that. Lastly, we have the president and CEO of the Georgia Hospital Association, and my friend, Caylee Noggle.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Caylee Noggle. I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Georgia Hospital Association, representing 150 hospitals across our state. First, I want to thank Governor Kemp for making tort reform his top legislative priority this year. Likewise, I appreciate the leadership of Senator John Kennedy, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and our partners in the Senate for passing Senate Bill 68. And I am thankful and hopeful for the interest and healthy debate that Speaker Burns has encouraged on this issue in the House. I know he too is committed to a fair and transparent process. Georgia proudly holds the title of the #1 state for business, yet we languish at number 47th for maternal health and near the bottom of a whole host of other healthcare rankings, a disconnect that underscores the persistent and multifaceted challenges in our healthcare system despite our hospitals and providers' dedication to safe, quality access to care. Over the years, we've made strides through tax credits, rural health initiatives, workforce investments, and Georgia's tailored Medicaid waivers. Stabilization grants, expanded service coverage, increased provider rates, and a focus on behavioral health have all moved us forward. And further investment in these efforts, I commend our state policymakers. However, we still have a long way to go. and hospitals and our healthcare providers are counting on our help. Make no mistake, we expect to be held accountable for our actions, and we support Georgians' rights to a fair and balanced court system. SB 68 protects that right, but also brings meaningful reform and balance to our civil justice system, easing pressures on our providers and our hospitals, which are key to safeguarding our workforce, enhancing patient safety, and averting tough choices that will lead to decreased healthcare access. This effort will help our providers feel safer to practice medicine in Georgia. We have always worked with all of our legislative partners in support of healthcare, and just as we continue to treat every Georgian that walks in our door for care regardless of their ability to pay, we will continue to work with every legislator and policymaker in the pursuit of a healthier Georgia. The Georgia Hospital Association continues to advocate strongly for the passage of Senate Bill 68 as passed by the Senate as a critical step towards preserving and improving Georgia's healthcare system. Thank you.
All right. And with that, we'll take any questions anybody has. Great. Certainly one of the big issues we've heard this week. And for that, we have Frank Fair from Legacy Ventures. He's the Vice President of Hotel Operations. Frank?
Thank you, Brian.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry. The question is about the claims that this closes access for recovery for sex trafficking victims.
Well, thank you for having me up here. And I want to reiterate, I am not a lobbyist or an attorney. I am a hotel operator. We have 6 properties in the state of 7, actually. We just purchased the Dillard House in Rayford County. We have 7 properties in the state of Georgia, and we also operate in 3 different states. I was the chairman of the GHLA, and I'm also was on a board of AHLA. And this is one of our #1 priorities every year since 2020. We have trained over 2.4 million team members around the country and have spent $3.4 million advocating for this. It is a big priority. It will not go away. And it's in Legacy Ventures, the company that I work for, it is our #1 priority. It's a pillar of our company. Safety and security of all of our guests is always at the forefront, despite what we pay in insurance and despite what the lawsuits will have. We will always have cameras. We will all have security guards at our properties. Nothing will change. It is a #1 priority. We also participate with local, federal, and state government on sting operations when necessary, and we're always going to do that.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the question. I remain optimistic. I remain optimistic that our legislative leaders and our policymakers are going to see the people standing behind me that are advocating for this and understand the concerns that we're bringing forward, and that now's the time to address this issue. So I'm going to remain optimistic.
Anyone else? We good? Thank you guys so much for being here today. Appreciate it.